Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? I guess we're returning to COVID again, but potentially looking at some more longer-term impacts perhaps.
Well, that's right, Ben. Hello, everyone. We're all COVID safe at the moment. And, with all these vaccines being announced, maybe 21 will be the year that things kind of go back to something that we might remember. But things will have changed because of COVID.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, just out of left field before we get onto our topics today, about there was that story about the Qantas CEO announcing, mandatory vaccine, or you have to prove that you've had the vaccine before you can hop on a flight, and that seemed to be getting broad adoption from other airlines as well. It will definitely be a different world if that sort of thing happens, and how they intend to put a standard in place that would be accepted by everyone, that's universally accepted as, yep, this proves you have the vaccine.
Yeah, look, I guess this has already been done, when in the olden days, and probably not even such the olden days, if you're going to places where there's malaria or other outbreaks, you're heavily advised to get your vaccinations before you go. So this is really an extension of that.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone should overthink it. I mean, just give a certificate with every vaccination and, you can scan it. And honestly, how they're going to enforce it anyway, I've got no idea.
Yeah, well, I guess time will tell. All right, well, we're going to jump through a couple of different topics, broadly sort of themed under the idea of what the longer-term sort of impacts of COVID is. Of course, prefacing that, we're actually a long way off from really knowing what the long-term impacts are going to be because we're still in the middle of it. But we have been sort of in this environment for at least, 8 or 9 months maybe now. And there have been some things that have started to develop over time. I'm going to start in perhaps a more trivial sort of place with this article from The Guardian that I saw, which had the title, "There's a sense that celebrities are irrelevant, and has coronavirus shattered our fame obsession? With their means of gaining attention dwindling, the famous are in panic mode, cluttering up Instagram and singing from their mansions." And of course, there was that infamous Gal Gadot, lead singing thing that she did where she sung Imagine with 50 of her friends on social media that was like canned by just about everyone. And there's plenty of examples too of some tone deaf celebrities, saying how tough life is while they're in lockdown in their mansions and all that sort of thing. And it's just the broader public are like, yeah, guys, just this isn't working. And maybe it's just highlighting that maybe the public may be demanding that celebrities actually provide something more than just sensation. They actually have to provide something of value like they did in the good old days.
Well, that's a really good point, Ben. I mean, when I first saw this story, I was probably a bit like you. It doesn't border on the trivial, but then you actually have a bit of a think about it. And the great thing about COVID is that it's been a real leveller. Yeah. So it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you're probably locked up in wherever you live, be that a mansion or a hovel, it makes no difference. And, the whole allure of celebrity has always been, first class and fast, flying all over the world to amazing locations, to do amazing things and have a far better time than anyone else, in the rest of the world, normal world can imagine. And that's been taken away. So even if you've got a beautiful mansion now, you're stuck there. And, of course, then, if you're a celebrity and, your last 50 posts are in the same room or by the same poolside, well, what's so exciting about that? And so I think the other thing that happens then is your posts start to look like everyone else's on Insta or Facebook. And I think it really has maybe not tarnished, but it certainly takes some of the shine off the whole idea of celebrity when they just end up TikToking like you end up TikToking. They take the same photo that you take. And, really you see that everyone's really at the end of the day the same when it comes to a virus.
Exactly. And I guess for me, it was just more some of the more egregious examples where they were complaining when people are obviously experiencing far tougher conditions when, really realistically they're not. And it was just a bit unfortunate. Obviously there were examples where that wasn't the case, where I think there was some effort by some to try and, add to the conversation, but it was a bit hit and miss.
But look, honestly, if your adoring public is sitting there worrying about how they're going to pay the rent or eat or something like that, you complaining that you're stuck by your same poolside for 50 days straight or 100 days straight is hardly like heart-rendering. And I think that's probably maybe the more superfluous celebrities are probably in danger. The ones that have real niche followings. I still think that the uber celebrities will be fine.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's move on to something a bit more obvious, I guess, which is the steady march towards cashless payments, digital payments, etc., which was already on its way prior to the pandemic coming in, but it's kind of kicked into high gear. With the pandemic, especially with a lot of businesses effectively saying we only accept cashless payments, and it has to be by card. You have to pay by your phone, whatever it is. And this wasn't really too unexpected, I guess. I don't think I've paid anything with cash in, well, probably since March, maybe. I can't even remember the last time I did. And I actually think it's perfectly fine, for day-to-day stuff, really. It's still an open question as to whether or not you could get rid of it entirely, cash that is, but at least not straight away. But it's getting there, it would seem.
I wonder about this because anecdotally I go to a lot of small businesses who still readily accept cash, and anecdotally I've heard from them that cash is not making a comeback. That's probably not the right way, but it went to almost zero cash payments during the height of the pandemic to now people are using cash again. Okay. And I understand that there's plenty of things, if you think about what banks know now in terms of transactions, the fact they know every time you buy a pizza or get Uber Eats or every time you go to the bottle shop, and how much you drink and all of those sorts of things. I think for a lot of people, if they really thought about it, you probably want to, maybe not lose the ability to pay cash for certain items. Yeah. I think, though, the interesting thing is the reason why cashless seems so predominant or has become so predominant now is just the cost of things. I mean, once upon a time you could walk around with a wallet full of, $200, $10, $20 bills and buy the world, but now that wouldn't be lucky to buy you lunch.
Exactly.
So, I think that's probably why cash is under a lot of pressure.
I guess that was the other aspect too that you touched on there is that idea of tracking. So obviously a bank can know exactly what your habits are just by following all of your credit card transactions and potentially, obviously like any of these other big institutions or companies, they're looking to sell you more stuff, and that's they're looking to sell their own products to you, which is probably where the main thrust of where that's coming from. But
it's interesting. Australian banks have only just started doing this recently, so apparently they twigged, a couple of years ago that Facebook, Google, Amazon, knew when you were buying, the actual time. They know what you're purchasing and are able to do all these analyses of you, the person, and how to market to you. And so banks are just working that out now, that if they actually look at all the transactions cashless, they can work out everything about you and how to sell you an even bigger home loan. So, it's took a while, but, I guess they're catching up.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on and we'll switch over to education now. And obviously there's been a big impact there on classrooms, schools, etc. With, and I guess Victoria probably is the best example of this in Australia, where there were months and months of basically no school attendance. It was all remote learning for such a long time. And that's obviously got to have an impact on how education is delivered. Obviously, there's room there potentially for sort of remote learning, making use of the new digital tools that we've got to communicate, etc. But I guess there's a challenge, with education, is that the school environment obviously has one of its biggest advantages too, is actually having all the kids together in the school, because there's that component of the interactions, etc. That's probably even more important than the workplace in some ways, because it's such a formative kind of period of kids' lives that they have to go through.
Well, learning to work together at school is how you learn to work together with other people in teams in your working life as you develop a career. So I was a bit bemused. There are a lot of people, or maybe it was just the media, that seemed quite concerned about learning online. I don't think there's any issue with learning online. If you sit there and listen to the teacher and read the textbook and follow the examples, it's no different to sitting in the classroom. As you pointed out, the big difference is whether or not you're working with someone at a laboratory bench, or you sit down to do a project together, or you have a project partner who you discuss some ideas with. I think while it might not be as bad online as people make out, I do think there's a huge need for that, face-to-face interaction on those things. So I think that's what people will come to appreciate. And I think you'll see probably in the future that you end up with a hybrid model that you might see in a lot of unis, where people tend to stay home for lectures, and where they're forced to come into for practicals or shoots, they come in, and that's where they get their interactions.
I was about to say that the university setting seems a lot more primed for more mixture of that type of environment coming in, and also doing it remotely, because that environment's probably a bit more flexible, because at the end of the day, no one's policing you to show up, unlike school, I guess.
Well, that's right. And then when I don't know, it's very confusing in the university environment. There are a lot of students adamant, which I think is a good thing, that they want to be face-to-face. They want to see lecturers face-to-face. They want to be in the lecture room.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you can go to a lecture and you can see a lot of people just sitting on their phones the whole way through. Yeah. And you ask them what's going on, they say, I'll catch up online later. Which I don't really understand, but, that's the kids today.
Absolutely. All right. And finally, I obviously got to touch on the work environment, because that one's there's a significant impact on that one. And with a lot of corporations, institutions, etc., starting to adopt more hybrid models of working in the office and working from home, particularly as there were chunks of the year where so many were forced to work from home. And again, Victoria is probably another good example of this, because we went through a much longer extended period where people had to do that, and arguably still are for the time being. We're still, I think it's until next week, I believe, that we're still under a must work from home if you can direction. What's interesting with this is finding the ability to have that mixture. There might be people that want to come into work all the time. There might be some that want to work from home a lot of the time. There'll be some that want to do a mixture, and just finding that balance about what works operationally. And I guess that'll also depend on the nature of the work as well. A lot of work potentially could be done anywhere, and with digital tools like Teams, WebEx, and all that we were talking about before, where people can attend virtual meetings without too much issue, as long as they got their laptop, even their phone, really, if they get stuck. A lot of those things are actually quite interesting in terms of adapting to the new work environment.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of hysteria about, I don't know, workers' claims, compensation claims in home-based injuries and whatnot, and people slacking off and all those sorts of things. I think the reality is that we haven't, at least we're not hearing a lot about these things, and I think that people who work at work will work at home, and people who don't work at work won't work at home anyway. So I don't think it's any secret. I think the new hybrid models are really positive, and I think that they offer great flexibility and potentially, where it's possible, really improve people's work-life balance. So, I'm all for it. And I think this is one big shift we'll see from COVID is the fact you don't need to be in the office every day of the week. And, some days it's just better to have a day a week or 2 days a week to be home and working.
And there are larger impacts to that too. So if, the entire population is not descending on the CBD, you get easing of things like traffic congestion and et cetera. But there could also be some downsides in that companies could potentially, they're not bring all their workers in and they're not flooding, all the coffee shops and all that sort of stuff as well. So depends on how it all plays out.
Yeah, well, I think we'll see a big shift because of that. The CBDs will change. I don't think it'll be as drastic as maybe, some of the sort of more sort of doomsday people were making out, but it will change things. But, I guess the consumer spend will shift as it's been shown from the city to the suburbs. And at what rate and what the real impact is for the CBD will be another question.
Absolutely. And just finally, that last story that we came across, being monitored by your boss while working from home. But I think there's nothing necessarily anything new in any of this, because obviously that would happen when you're in the office. It's just, I guess, what they're suggesting there is that if you're working from home, they could download tools onto your device to monitor what you're doing, and this potentially could freak some people out, I guess.
Oh, yeah, look, I feel like I don't care about this anymore, the boss monitoring me, because, and I'm sure a lot of honest people who work hard wouldn't be bothered either, and they're the people that don't create any trouble at work. I think it's quite apparent who isn't working. And as for tools, I mean, you could just run some AI over your email profile or your access to the shared drives or, the time spent on VPN. Any of those things would just determine any irregularities from your last, 6 years at work.
Yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens in that respect and what would be implemented. But like you said, people that want to work will still work, even regardless of location, and those that don't will still find ways not to work. But the thing is, those people might be lulled into a false sense of security that because there are no eyes on them, that no one's watching.
I think that's what people like to think now, but let's face it, your social media platform knows how hard you're working because they'll be mapping the amount of time you spend in the browser or on the platform. Your bank will be mapping what you're spending while you're meant to be working at home. So, all those transactions, everything that we do online is being watched. So to think that your employer was watching you as well, I don't really know that you can make a case against that. I mean, why shouldn't they be able to see what you're doing when the rest of the world can?
Yeah, exactly. All right, we might wrap it up there, and it'll be interesting. Maybe we can return to this maybe in a year's time or something and see how much. Because I think we've maybe touched on this before. It'll be next year that I think we'll start to see some real impacts of what has happened this year. It's still a bit of fog of war stuff that's happening right now, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in about 12 months from now.
It'll definitely be a different place to what it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.